Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, When Leaders Underperform, Executive Investigations. Today, you get to hang out with Christy. She walks you through this next 30 minutes. And yes, I said 30 minutes. This is not an hour, so we are not awarding CPE for this presentation this afternoon. A few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Christy. You can customize what you're seeing on your screen by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. You can maximize the PowerPoint or maximize the webcam, whichever you prefer. And for our audio options this afternoon, we have both the computer and the dial-in option. You can toggle back and forth if you're having trouble with either one. We do find that the dial-in option is a little bit more reliable as it is not streamed over internet. You can download what you are seeing projected up onto the screen in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. You can download that PDF for your reference. Any questions, we ask that you submit those into the questions portion of the GoToWebinar panel, as we do not monitor the chat box. With this webinar only being 30 minutes, if we do have a couple minutes, we will answer them. However, if not, Christy will answer them offline via email to your personal email. We will not have any polls today. Like I said, we are not offering CPE today. And please give us a good review, bad review. Let us know how we did in our survey. And also, if you have any questions, comments, please drop it in there and we will address those with you personally offline. So without further ado, Christy, they're all yours.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Good afternoon, everyone. Unless maybe you're on the West Coast, it might still feel like morning to you. So with this session, it really is a collection of experiences, insights, and things I learned along the way. So recently we were collaborating internally and just talking about, hey, what are some things that we're seeing? What are some things that are happening, experiences? And as we were talking through those, I began to wonder, some of these experiences and things that I've encountered or seen or helped clients with, I wondered how many more were struggling with something similar, right? And so that's why you're getting this presentation today. I'm excited that all of you chose to join it. Whether you have something currently that's weighing heavily on your heart or on your mind, keeping you up at night, or if you just want to be prepared in the event that something like this might happen. I wish I could go into specifics because I know that we all do learn from specific examples and situations and scenarios, but because of the delicate nature of these types of conversations, I can't do that. I can give you themes, I can give you some insight, so I don't want you to be disappointed in thinking that you're going to hear some specific examples as I've done in previous presentations, but I am happy to talk offline with any of you if there is interest to peel back a situation further that you might have and how it might relate to one or more of the experiences I've seen along the way. So, of course, many of you already know me. If you don't, bio's out on the website. I'm not going to bore you with all those details. I'm really just a nerd who loves talking about all things people and offering the workforce advisory services to our clients and those who might have a need or just want to elevate what they do and how they do it. So today we're going to talk about handling employee concerns. That's a lot of times where these things bubble up. Somebody shares something with us, and then we're like, wow, what do we do with that? We're going to peel the onion back. It's a phrase that we use. We've commonly said it. You probably heard me even say it before, but there's usually layers to any type of situation, whether it's something simple or something more complex like we're talking about today. But really, how do we dig deep and figure out what truly is happening? Because that's the only way that we can truly address maybe some undercurrents that are happening in your organization or between two individuals. We're going to talk about how to determine those next steps and then what moving forward looks like. As you know, this type of conversation is very delicate for many different reasons, whether it's an owner or a top executive in the C-suite or even just a senior leader. A lot of time there's a strong connection to the organization. So again, it's an owner. How do you receive feedback about an owner that isn't always positive? How do you receive feedback from a top executive that has a critical role? And how do you go forward with that? What do you do? So when an employee expresses a concern or doesn't, what do we do? So for smaller businesses, a lot of times it might bubble up to HR, could go to a supervisor or a manager, and sometimes you don't have those individuals in an organization based on your size or based on the way that your company is formed. So who does somebody go to? Maybe they don't have anybody. And so if they don't have anybody, that puts us as an organization at risk. Because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. And if we should have known about it and we did nothing about it and we weren't aware of it, sometimes an employee could report us to an outside agency with the concern that we were just negligent, right? Purposely avoiding or not looking into things more closely. And that's obviously the worst case scenario. We don't want that to happen. So anytime that an employee makes a comment to a colleague and it gives you pause, it definitely needs to be looked at further, right? So whether it was a CEO who was bullying somebody or a senior leader who is tit for tat or just being rude, very simple examples, right? Those are things that we need to look at more closely, because if it's one person, are there others that are getting that type of interaction or receiving that type of feedback or interaction with that individual? And we just don't know. So whether somebody comes to us formally or informally, we have to do something with that. And we have to make sure that people know it's not we're tattling, right? No, we want to make sure we continue to provide a fun and safe workplace. And by doing so, we need to make sure if somebody's stepping outside of those guide rails that we certainly look at it a little bit more closely. So when a comment is made from one colleague to the other, maybe it's just a vent, but maybe it's more. And hopefully those individuals, one or both of them, will escalate it to a supervisor or manager. And the worst thing that we can do is brush it away and act like, oh, it's just another day, just ignore that person. No, we can't do that. And we have to be able to insert ourselves. So if you don't have leaders in your organization that have handled delicate situations and maybe some uncomfortable conversations, then look outwardly and see if there's somebody that could lean in and help. So you can get in trouble if somebody just verbally expresses a concern, I feel harassed, or things like that. So any type of complaint or concern brought forward, you want to take it seriously. You want to make some notes and you want to be able to work through, are there any additional steps that need to be taken? And when somebody says nothing at all, that's where, could we potentially have a legal obligation here, or could we lose talented people, right? If individuals aren't coming forward and saying, hey, we've got an issue on our team, and others, our top talent continues to leave, that too could be a significant impact on the organization. All of this is probably not a surprise to you, but it's setting the stage for what we're going to talk about here as we move forward. So when I'm thinking about the root cause, I'm wondering what's underlying. Is there a personality conflict where one person is very outgoing and results oriented and somebody else is more timid, reserved, quiet? Could that be the source of maybe some of the conflict or differences or a negative interaction? Is there truly harassment happening where somebody is persistently agitating or targeting somebody, setting them apart from others, maybe even in a discriminatory way based upon certain specific things about myself because I'm a white woman over the age of 40? Is somebody treating me in a way that's different that is how somebody else is treated, and so forth? And we certainly don't have the time to dig into these too deep. We're really going to talk more about the lack of leadership in this session. But anytime you have any hint of harassment or discrimination, you contact your attorney. You want to make sure that you're doing all the right things today to set you up to hopefully get to a successful outcome. Whatever that path might be, we want to make sure that, hey, we can move forward in a positive way, solve the issue, resolve any outstanding disagreements and so forth, and move forward. And there's so much that can happen in that path right there in and of itself. So let's look here at lack of leadership. Over the years, I have found that when somebody comes to me and says, Christy, we have a concern with one of our leaders, they're not displaying the type of leadership that we would want them or desire them to have, I have to then lean in harder. And that's where I'm peeling back the onion and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is the root cause? Is it really just a personality issue or is it something more? And when we're thinking about leadership, a lot of times maybe they're absent. They're not involved. They're not connected. People don't feel like they can approach them. They're wasting their time and so forth. So that might be one thing. The other is a leader who fails to communicate. So not communicating plans, providing a vision. There was a situation where an owner was aging close to 70 and he wasn't communicating anything to his team about what his future looked like. Everybody saw the writing on the wall. You're an owner, significant owner, and you haven't communicated a plan. What does that mean? Left those individuals feeling fearful, so they decided to step away and go to another organization. And so, if we're not communicating what we want or need our team to know and hear, that in and of itself can cause some chaos, confusion, and turmoil, right? An unapproachable leader is not one that we would want in our organization, right? Because our leaders are the ones that have to help keep our employees feeling connected to the organization and motivating them and leveraging their strengths. And if we don't have a leader who can truly be approachable and have conversations one-on-one with individuals, there might be a misalignment there. A leader who has unrealistic expectations and just keeps dumping work on somebody could potentially have unintended complications, right? Or unintended consequences, I should say, in that people will get burned out. They'll feel exhausted. They'll feel not successful. They might look to leave the organization or just feel defeated day in and day out. And then that can weigh on them from a mental, emotional, etc. standpoint. Indecisiveness. So as we look at leaders, we need them to make decisions. We need them to use their wisdom, their insights, their experiences, their expertise to guide the organization forward. Jump in at times where we have maybe a challenging situation to solve or a complex matter or an angry client or customer, right? We've all been there, unfortunately. And so if we don't have leaders who are willing to step up and protect the team, that in and of itself could cause a lot of unsettled feelings and behaviors with the employees. And then we already talked about inappropriate behavior, crossing the lines between friend and leader, supervisor, manager, and that's a whole other path we could talk probably for an hour about. But as you can see, there could be one or more at play here. If we recognize, hey, something is amiss with this leader, and sometimes they are great initially, but there might be a life change that happens along the way. Maybe they're diagnosed with cancer, or maybe they had a tragedy happen in their world, or maybe they just lost the gusto themselves. They're no longer motivated. So any one of those things along the way could truly impact their ability to continue to lead the organization into the future. And so that then just has that ripple effect where people are not feeling like this is the type of leadership that they need to be successful on their team. So anytime that somebody comes forward with a concern or a complaint, we have to first let that individual know it's important to us and we're going to make it a priority. Now, some can be a quick solve. Maybe it's a personality situation and we can easily help them better understand each other, better understand how to work together better, and be able to hopefully move forward successfully in a better way. But if it's something more severe, harassment, discrimination, etc., or anything else, we might have to do a formal investigation. And so at that point, we have to determine, do we handle it internally? Do we have the people internally who can do a fair and impartial investigation? Maybe we're so small we don't have somebody who has the experience to be able to handle a delicate conversation like this or a complex situation. So then we might need to look externally. So you might look externally to an attorney, get guidance from an employment attorney. What do we do? Are we taking the right steps? Anything that we're not thinking about that we should consider? And certainly at that point, they might recommend you bring in somebody else. And that's what happens to me frequently, is that I will have a board of directors or an attorney come to me and say, hey, Christy, we need you to lean in here. And so that leaning in could look a variety of different ways. One, maybe I'm doing a formal investigation and I'm having to walk through very specific, uncomfortable questions and getting answers if it's a situation of harassment, etc. Or maybe it's more about the lack of leadership and I have to just get a pulse, like what are some of the themes? What are some of the things that are happening? Are they on that list that I shared before? Or is there something different, right? And try to get to the root cause of whatever might be happening so we know the best path forward. Is it a legal matter? Has any rule, law been violated? Are we at jeopardy or at risk because of the situation that occurred? Or is it more of a leadership, cultural, etc., where we have to solve it internally and we haven't violated any laws or rules, etc.? So this is very important because the moment that you have a concern that can't easily be solved because it's a personality conflict, definitely start going down this path of questions to figure out who do we need to pull in strategically to make sure that we are taking that right path forward. I can't emphasize that enough. I know everybody cringes and said, oh, I don't want to pay the attorney fees. I don't want to bring a consultant in. I'm telling you that investment is far less than if it escalates to the most ugly place. And then you're looking at thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars. So try to keep that in perspective, because I know our gut instinct is like, oh, we can do it ourselves. Well, you may not want to. And if you're unsure, call me. I'll let you know what I think. So as we're going down the path of trying to uncover, what really is at play here, what's happening, we have to keep in the back of our mind, what is the role of an executive, right? And this a lot of times comes into play when we're deciding, is this the right leader for our organization? Do they really have a good handle on the culture? Are they an advocate for us? And are they really helping people to feel connected and part of that culture, right? Pretty easily, you might be able to say yes or no. Or if you're in the middle, then we have to ask more questions. Are they an individual who can protect the organization, right? So the senior leaders in the organization have to make sure that we're doing things from a safety perspective, treating our people the right way. And there's a myriad of other things that we need to be worried about. But does that person have the best interest of the organization at heart, or are their actions and behaviors flying in the face of that and putting us at risk? Does this leader have the ability to move us forward into the future? And the future is going to look different depending on whatever organization you're with. And so do they have the true leadership skills to take us forward, whether you're in growth mode or stable, or you're in a mature mode? Looking at what's ahead, will this leader continue to be able to move forward and then really help the organization achieve operational excellence, right? So good leaders, good executives are hitting the mark on most of these, or at least have it as a priority or worry to continue to do better and get the organization to a place where you feel like, hey, we really are doing a pretty good job with all of these. These questions here have developed over time through the work that I've done, but it started with a mistake that I made. And so I made a mistake many years ago, and I talked to my mentor about it because I was beating myself up. And if any of you know me and seen my email signature, responsibility is my number one strength. And so with that, I will beat myself up more than anybody else can beat me up. And so he asked me two questions. He said, did you do something unethical? I said, no. He said, are you trustworthy? I said, yes. And so those two questions really stuck in my mind over the years as I'm pulled into these delicate situations and I'm having to help a client evaluate, is this the right person in our organization to help us move forward? So I ask that question, and it's very interesting the responses I get. A lot of times people easily can say yes or no to the ethical question. They recognize it right away. There might have been a few times where I've seen a little bit of pausing, but they were connecting it to one specific decision or situation. But overall, the people that I have talked to, yes, these are ethical leaders, okay? Now, the next one, is this individual trustworthy? So at the end of the day, I think most people would say, yes, I would trust that person with my life. As an individual, I know they would take care of me if I'm ready to step in front of a bus. They're going to help pull me out of the way, right? But it's this next piece that I have seen a variety of different answers and responses, from adamantly, no, I don't trust them. I don't trust their leadership. I don't trust the decisions that they're making. I don't trust that they have the best interest at heart for me, my team, the organization. Or they might pause a little bit. And so when I get the adamantly, no, I don't trust them, I'm like, is there anything that they can do to repair that trust? And so a variety of answers, as you would expect. Some would say, no, it's gone. It can't be repaired. And then I have others who would say, well, I think so. And I'm like, okay, well, what specifically could be done, right? And they'll give me examples. And so that shows me that we have opportunity potentially to get to a better place, right? And so those three questions, I should say, there about ethical way, are they a trustworthy individual, and can I trust them as a leader to help guide us successfully into the future? Those for me are at the essence of what we need to have as a foundation in our organization, right? And so if you look at many different leadership models and frameworks and so forth, you'll see trust is at the very core. If we don't have that, it's really hard to build, right? And I don't need to preach to the choir here. But the last one here is, okay, knowing where we're currently at and the perception of the people that are around this individual, can this person be coached? Can they get to a better place? Is there opportunity for them to correct or fix or rebuild something that they have lost along the way? And the answers vary all the time. So yes, they're coachable. Great. Now what do we do, right? So maybe they just lost their way. They had a tragedy in their world. Maybe they had an illness and they just weren't thinking clearly and they weren't leading and guiding in the way that they normally had in the past. They kind of lost their way. I think we can all relate at moments in our past where that would have been appropriate to say, right? And so do we have to restore the credibility? Did they make a bad decision? And now we have to explain why that decision was made. And yep, I made a mistake. It wasn't the right decision, but with the information I now have in front of me, I would make this decision instead. So that's where you can build that credibility. And does the trust have to be rebuilt? Well, if that has to be rebuilt, well, then let's talk about those specific examples where the people had said, this is what they need to do. And a lot of time it's through actions, right? It's louder than words. And so show up, continue to be consistent, and make sure that you're showing the team that, hey, they can rely on you and they can trust in you as their leader going forward. This person that you're evaluating, the senior leader or executive, it would probably be helpful for them to be coached or mentored by somebody. And it may not be somebody internally, it could be somebody externally, it could be somebody that the organization doesn't know, maybe it's somebody that's on a board that's connected to the organization. Whoever that is, it's going to allow that person to have some honest conversations. Maybe they themselves have to vent because they're going through a lot of emotions, but then also so that coach and mentor can continue to provide that candid, transparent feedback of, hey, these are the things you still need to work on, right? And so that growth will be important to show in front of the people that were let down by this individual, and being able to have a coach or mentor to advocate for that person to say, hey, these are the things they're working on, and here are the things we still need to put some energy towards. And really specifically, what are those key milestones? So if we're talking about the trust and there are a couple key things that have to be done differently, or are there specific goals that have to be achieved, whatever that might be, but you want to be able to evaluate that performance to make sure you do have a successful outcome. Could be a small, could be a large successful outcome. You have to determine what that is. So that way that executive knows that all the energy they're putting in to receive the coaching, shift their behavior, and do a better job, that they know, hey, I am moving in that direction. And sometimes you have to get the feedback again. You have to circle back to the individuals and say, hey, are you seeing a difference? If so, great. If not, why? And let's continue to have that conversation. So my hope, my Pollyanna world, is that yes, we can take somebody, coach them, and get them to a better place so that way they have the trust of their teams once again, right? And then they can all grow and learn through that experience. But what if they're not coachable, right? I've had that happen too. And so that's where we have to find an exit strategy. So if the trust is broken and that individual can't restore it with his or her team, then unfortunately, it's just not going to work moving forward, right? Anything that that person does, they're still not going to build the trust, which is the foundation. And so finding out how do we move forward, right? So we have to think about, okay, do we need legal to be involved? Should we get an attorney? Whether we have to look at a severance package or we have to think about non-compete or some other variables there. And if it's a lack of leadership, what does that look like? Is it a fade out? Is it something that we do sharply? Again, it's going to vary from one situation to the other. So, you know, somebody might be disgruntled that they were called to the carpet on their actions and behaviors and that they couldn't successfully continue any more past today in that role. Or we could be in a place where we say, you know what, it's just not working out. Let's try to work together to get to the future path of what that might be. So timing will be critical. Do you have people internally that can step in the interim till you find a replacement who can carry the responsibilities and act as an interim? whatever vice president or whoever, or do you need somebody externally to step in and help through the transition? And then really evaluate who is that person that we need to bring into our organization who's going to not only display all of those leadership qualities that we need in an individual, but then also to help those individuals who do feel, hurt and harmed, maybe depending on the situation with what has occurred. How do they help them transition into the future, restore their confidence in the organization, and really be delicate with how they help that team? Because it's not going to be easy. It's not just plopping into an organization that was running well. There are some things, some baggage that might come along with that, that individual, that leader is going to have to help work through. And handling all that change is a critical quality of the person that's selected to come in, right? It's not easy stepping in when you have to immediately just start repairing things, but there are some leaders that are just very talented and able to do that. And knowing they make a difference definitely helps pull them through maybe some of those difficult conversations that might have to happen along the way as well with the teams. So I left about 4 minutes here. Curious to see if anybody has any questions about what I shared. I know I couldn't go too deep, and I'm sorry that I can, as you can appreciate the delicate nature of these types of conversations. But what I've found over the years is really making sure you have the right people at the table to fully evaluate what decision has to be made here. Because at the end of the day, if you can be at peace, yes, we all don't like having these conversations. We all would like maybe a different outcome. But at the end of the day, we've got to show people dignity and respect, and we've got to be at peace at what this decision is. I'll leave you with one note before I answer this question that I see pop up, is, anytime that I have had to help move somebody out of an organization, there were people that were unhappy. They didn't understand it, because they didn't have all the information that I or the team that had to work through this difficult decision was privy to. And so I've never had somebody who was just unhappy with that decision come back and tell me later that it was the wrong decision, right? They usually, over a period of time, can see, you know what, it was the right decision. I see why it was made. I'm sad that that person's not here. I may not have necessarily agreed with it. However, I understand it now. So if you're worried about that, be patient, because in my experience, that has been what I've seen so far. So let me go ahead here. Kaylee, I'm having a little struggle getting these questions. Let me see if I can, there, I can blow it out. Okay. How do you deal with indecisive leadership? Well, we have to look at the leader and see if they have the ability to make decisions. Some people just innately, their personality, they can't make decisions. It's really hard for them. It causes them some anxiety and nervousness and so forth. And so if that's the type of person you're dealing with, I don't know that you could ever teach them to be a good decision maker. You can make small incremental improvements, give them a little bit of some tools and tips, but if you have that person in an executive role, I don't think it's going to be a successful outcome. I appreciate if somebody can step forward and counter argue that and give me some techniques that really would work, because that would be worthwhile to share out to everybody. So, all right, somebody, okay. I see that Kayla, you answered the other question. So I believe that's it. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. Hopefully you found value in this 30 minutes that we spent together, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.